Welcome to the Explainer. So let's just dive right into this. Have you ever wondered why our absolute most frustrating arguments happen even when everyone involved is telling the exact same truth? I mean, you bring the receipts, they bring the receipts, and somehow you're both still absolutely furious. It's this visceral, exhausting frustration. Well, today we're going to unpack the Deru Kailo framework to figure out exactly why this happens, and we're going to focus specifically on what the framework calls the reality domain.
Right, so we've all been there. Both sides feel completely 100% right, yet the communication just completely breaks down. You're giving the facts, they're giving the facts, but man, it feels like you're speaking two entirely different languages. And why is that? Because believe it or not, you are actually having two entirely different conversations without even realizing it. It's kind of like trying to play chess while the other person is playing checkers on the exact same board. You're both playing by the rules of your own game, but the pieces aren't interacting. You're literally just colliding.
And that brilliantly illustrates the core thesis of the Deru Kailo framework. The master claim here is that misunderstanding is so often a layer mismatch rather than a true fundamental disagreement. Just think about a statement like, "You never listen to me." On the surface, that might look and sound like a factual accusation about, your hearing or your attention span. But the reality is, it could actually mean something entirely different. It could mean, "I don't feel understood," or "I feel unimportant to you in this moment." See, the words spoken are just the surface. The psychological need behind them is the actual conversation. Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, fighting the wrong conversation. Second, the reality domain. Third, event, pattern, context. Fourth, common layer mismatches. And finally, number 5, anchoring without erasing. Let's get right into it. Now, the Deru Kailo 9-layer framework operates across 3 distinct domains. We've got reality, perception, and meaning. And notice the specific sequence here, because the order is literally everything. Reality gives us the firm, undeniable ground. Then perception steps in to give us the subjective human experience of that ground. And finally, meaning gives us the deeper symbolic significance. The core trap we fall into during arguments is trying to jump safely to meaning or making massive assumptions about someone's character without ever actually establishing our footing on the ground first. So let's define our core focus for this explainer, the reality domain. This foundational domain is what gives us the ground and stabilizes our interpretation before we jump to those wild assumptions. It deliberately slows down that really dangerous leap from "something happened" all the way to "this proves exactly who you are and what you meant." Skipping this step, bypassing our shared reality to instantly argue about intent or meaning, is quite literally the root cause of most toxic, escalating communication. To navigate the reality domain properly, we don't just guess. We use a really exact operational formula. We logically examine what happened, if it keeps happening, and what surrounded it. Then, and this is crucial, we set a limit. The limit and next layer steps are the absolute secret weapons of the sequence. They act as hard boundaries, so facts aren't weaponized against us. They basically remind us that knowing what happened doesn't automatically mean we know how it felt, safely guiding us to the next layer of the conversation. Which brings us to step 1, event. The physical layer. This layer protects our contact with reality by focusing strictly on observable facts. We're talking about raw data here. For example, knowing whether an email reply was sent at exactly 8:42 a.m., or what specific words were recorded in a meeting. But hey, it's not just about what happened. Omissions, what didn't happen physically, are just as much a part of this layer. We also look at physical space and concrete evidence. We always start with this foundation, but remember, it is absolutely crucial that we do not stop here. Moving on to step 2, pattern, the structural layer. Now, the really crucial point here is distinguishing between an isolated physical incident and a structural pattern. Think about leaving dirty dishes in the sink, right? If it happens one single time, okay, that's just an event. But if one person is always the one who has to notice, remind, and clean those dishes week after week after week, that is a structural pattern. Treating a repeated pattern as if it's just a one-time physical event is a guaranteed way to make an argument explode. It turns a simple "could you do the dishes" into an all-out screaming match about baseline respect. And step 3, context, the contextual layer. I absolutely love this phrase, "context explains, it does not excuse." This perfectly captures the mature position of the framework. Let's say a coworker misses a really crucial high-stakes meeting. The physical event is simply their absence. But if the context is that they were in the emergency room, well, that surrounding condition completely changes how we understand the event. It explains the absence entirely. But, and this is a really big but, it doesn't automatically excuse them from the responsibility of having to catch up on the work they missed. Context provides the full picture without just erasing accountability. Okay, let's talk about common layer mismatches. So now we're getting to the real core of our explainer. Look at this classic mismatch right here. Person A names a felt emotional impact from the experiential layer, saying, "That hurt me." Meanwhile, person B defensively names a literal fact from the physical layer. "I answered every point." And you know what? Both statements are entirely true, but they are fighting the completely wrong conversation. You cannot solve an experiential hurt with a physical timeline. When you try to do that, the hurt person just feels completely gaslit, ignored, or like they're being managed rather than actually heard. Throwing facts at a feeling is a massive structural failure in communication. Or consider this painful mismatch where someone raises a symbolic meaning and the other person completely invalidates it with a mere physical description. Imagine a boss correcting an employee's minor math error, but doing it in front of 50 colleagues. The employee says, "That was humiliating." The boss replies, "It was just a correction. The math was wrong." See, the boss is stubbornly defending the physical truth, while completely ignoring the symbolic layer, the fact that doing it publicly signaled a massive lack of respect. Saying it was just a correction, it might be factually true, but it brutally misses the reality of that public context. This table really cleanly synthesizes these traps. It shows us exactly why technically true responses fail so miserably when they answer the wrong layer. Let's just walk through it quickly. If the active layer is physical, say determining if an email was actually sent, and you answer with, "Well, that is not how I felt," it fails. Your feeling is totally valid, but it doesn't replace the physical fact. Or if someone brings up a structural pattern and you deflect with, "It was just one time," you fail to address the repetition. You have to answer the specific layer that is actively being challenged. Otherwise, you're literally just talking to a brick wall. And as this breakdown clearly illustrates, facts shouldn't erase experience, and experience shouldn't replace facts. A feeling can vividly reveal how something landed, and a fact can firmly establish what happened. Honestly, this is perhaps the hardest discipline to master in any argument. We so desperately want our feelings to dictate the facts, or we want our undisputed facts to completely invalidate someone else's messy feelings. But they don't prove the same things. The discipline here is letting each domain say exactly what it can say and absolutely no more. Which brings us to anchoring without erasing. We anchor the conversation in the physical, structural, and contextual reality, sure, but we don't use those facts as a shield to avoid accountability or to dismiss someone's human experience. Let's look really closely at that last bullet point. Honest uncertainty is better than forced agreement. We so often fall into the trap of false agreement, saying, "Fine, you're right, whatever," just to end a fight. But that only breeds deep, deep resentment. The framework teaches us that resting in honest uncertainty creates actual room for curiosity, which is far healthier than a fake resolution. Ultimately, the most practical advice in this whole explainer is to stop asking who is right and instead start asking what kind of claim is being made. Are we arguing about an event, a pattern, or an emotional impact? Think of it kind of like navigating the woods. Before you raise your shield to defend your position, pull out your compass. Locate the layer. If you locate the layer before you start defending, you instantly turn your defensive posture into shared orientation. It's a real game changer. And this is the bold core of the Deru Kailo system. We use this framework to clarify our understanding, never to control, win against, or reinterpret someone against their will. It's all about shared coherence. Now, coherence here doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with the other person. It simply means you finally understand exactly what you are disagreeing about. You see the board clearly, and for the first time, you are finally playing the exact same game. So the next time you feel completely right but completely misunderstood, just hit pause. Ask yourself, will I just blindly defend my position, or will I locate the layer? Let the reality domain anchor you, but don't let it blind you to the rest of the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and keep locating those layers.
Want to learn more? Explore the full framework in reality, perception, and meaning. Available now at derukailo.com and on Amazon Kindle.